your own could have done this.
So we are called to sing. All of us are called to sing. All of us are called to express ourselves and join our voice into the unity of the church. Often with my choirs, I ask them to listen to each other, to listen to the sound that they make together as one. That's what we're aiming for. Through the harmony or unison, we're aiming for a one sound.
You need to decide. What are you going to participate in? Are you going to participate in the historic Christian idea of the altar of sacrifice, which is in the Eucharist, or not? Are you?
Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. I am Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us here on this winter evening, and couldn't be more excited. As always, I'm joined by my friend Ann DeSantis, and Ann is here. How are you this evening, Ann? It is a nice evening here in Wisconsin. How is it in Philadelphia?
Well, it's nice here too. Maybe I don't sound as convinced. I mean, we just had a snowstorm the other day, so we're getting over it. We have about 6 inches or so of snow on the ground, but
wow.
But yeah, I think the roads are clear, and that makes it nice.
Yes, it does, especially
That
on the
makes
East
it
Coast.
nice.
Well, we have wonderful guests tonight. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, I was very excited for this show. We have Carlos Solorzano. He's a BA and MA in Religious Studies, certified with Theology of the Body Institute, and he is also a published author. And Angelica DellaLlana, MSN, APRN, FNPC. Now we're going to learn what all those titles mean. She is a family nurse practitioner and a catechist, but most importantly, they are with an organization called Humana Corpus Dignitate. And you can learn about them on their website at hcdtalks.com. And it says on their email, it says, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God, and that you are not your own?" 1 Corinthians 6:19. I had to read that because I think that has all to do with what you're doing. So welcome, Carlos and Angelica.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and we're really excited. We've been looking forward to this for a few weeks now. So,
Yeah, it's great to have you.
It really is. We're amazed because I'll be honest, we've had all kinds of guests on this show, but for what you're doing, I think this might be the first time. So I'm extremely excited about that, and about your wonderful work with hcdtalks.com. Now, Angelica, you're coming to us from California, the Los Angeles area.
yes.
And Carlos is coming to us from Arizona. We're all in different spots. I'm in Philadelphia and Bill's in Wisconsin. So really representing a lot of different places here on this podcast tonight.
East to west.
That's
Yes.
right. East to west to Midwest. So why don't we start with you, Angelica? Tell us about yourself and how did you get involved in HCD Talks?
Well, it was actually a really collaborative thing. So I've been a nurse for 11 years now. I've worked anywhere from ICU to aesthetics. So I've done the whole cosmetic portion side of it too. And I've seen a lot of body dysmorphia, women getting addicted to artificially altering their their looks and to try to make themselves look and feel good. And so Carlos, like you mentioned, is actually certified with theology of the body. And a lot of what he would do is he would try to pull in the physiological part into his teaching. So he would kind of bounce things off of me. We'd been friends for a very long time. So he would bounce things off of me. And then whenever I would teach catechism, I would ask him questions theologically, since he's been teaching for quite some time now, and has an extensive theological background. So, and then one day we were talking, and he kind of mentioned a couple of times probably trying to work with a medical professional to try to get this thing going. And we finally did. And the thing that hit both of us is the fact that this has actually been on my heart for a long time, to do more, not just with my profession and my faith separately, but I wanted to try to find some way to put it together. And so the fact that he opened my eyes to bringing in the science and the medicine and all of that data into the theological portion, and really synthesize the information and showing how our bodies were created to do these things that is written in scripture was fascinating to me. And so we started talking about that and started putting it all together. So
awesome.
Yeah, I will say awesome as well. And I remember a couple months back, Carlos had gotten in touch with me, and we talked, and you and I also talked, Angelica, and that was wonderful. And I learned so much when I talked to him and you about what you're doing with HCD Talk. So Carlos, please tell us about yourself and how you began this journey.
It's actually really funny because I grew up my parents are devout Catholics, and so that was part of our family heritage. And I didn't go to Catholic school till high school, and I kind of actually went against my will. It's a long story, but the one thing that I remembered was I was really intrigued by the theology classes. And this is actually really bizarre because at the time my goal in life was to actually be a professional musician. And I actually studied music in college for several years. And it wasn't until my last year when I just went through this, I was going through kind of a faith journey at the same time in college, because I always kind of look for something more substantial. So the whole college life didn't appeal to me anyway. And I was, I had to work and stuff too. So it wasn't like I was really doing anything crazy. And even when I was already performing in the nightclubs and all, like I really wanted to do something musically. So it was like I wanted substance. And so it was funny because in my freshman year of college, I kept meeting a lot of evangelical Christians, and they kept challenging on my faith. And I knew the truths of Catholicism, but I just didn't know how to deliver it. So I had talked with my dad, and we went and got some books at some of the Catholic bookstores, and I just started eating them up. Really, I loved it. And so long story short, I ended up changing my major my senior year. So I had to do all the classes in a year because that's all the money I had left. So I just decided right then and there I want to be a teacher, and which is really crazy at the time because I never would have thought that. So I started teaching in high school, and I've done that for now. This is my 24th year, and a while ago I did do 6 years in college doing more like the ethics and philosophy. But it was really funny in a sense because when a lot of theology teachers in all the Catholic high schools around the country, they kind of have their opinions about the bishop's curriculum, and I won't get into that. But in the previous curriculum, I was always teaching the scripture classes because my studies were in the Bible. And there's that saying about if you want to hear God laugh, make plans. So I went to grad school. I was doing church history. I had these ambitions to get into global Christianity. And then my job just stuck me in the morality classes. And I'm like, I don't want to teach morality. You got to cover all the hard topics. And of course, and I didn't have the extensive background at the time. And so I kept doing it, and I realized I was stuck with it. And then what ended up happening was a previous employer of mine, somehow one of my colleagues introduced me to theology of the body. And I at first read the Christopher Weth's small beginner's book, was completely floored by it. And then next thing I know, I'm being asked if I want to take courses at the Institute, which is in Philadelphia. So I've been out there. I had to go out there 8 times and do my courses. And I'll just say it was painfully beautiful. It was so life affirming. And as soon as I started learning the material, it changed how I saw myself. It changed how I saw others. And I just wanted to go home and start sharing it with other people. So when I started to share it with Angelica, because like somehow that kind of got into our conversations too, she was intrigued by it. And then next thing I know, we're talking about how, what are some ways we can share things relating to the dignity of the human person. And then that's what kind of was the root of our ministry.
Yeah, wow, that's a wonderful start. And interesting that you were out here in Philadelphia too. And that was kind of the beginning of all of this with hcdtalks.com. So how long have you been in existence? And tell us that once you made that decision to go in this direction, how has it been with this ministry and what kinds of things are you doing right now?
So we actually started to develop a plan to start the ministry, but at the time I was finishing grad school. So we waited and we officially became our ministry last year, actually. So this is only a little over a year ago that we officially launched. And we are actually now a nonprofit organization as well. So,
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So we made it all official. Right now, we're doing a catechetical formation. A lot of it has to do with talking to parents and talking to teenagers. We've done quite a few adolescent talks on some of the harder subjects, actually. Theology of the body talks about the human body and how, we should see ourselves and each other as a gift. But with the way society has inundated us with this hypersexualized culture, unfortunately, a lot of the choices that we make are based on our desires rather than our moral choices and our ethical choices. So it's kind of bringing to light, not necessarily that this is wrong and you shouldn't do this, but the why. These are the possible consequences of our actions. We all have free will and we can all choose to do what we all have a choice. Adam and Eve had a choice. They were given that choice, but just because you have the choice, do you make that? Do you choose to do it? If you do you know what can happen? And so, and seeing ourselves and trying to see ourselves in a different light before we make the choice, right? Because a lot of the times when we do certain actions, it's because of, previous experiences, negative experiences. We want to feel belonging. We want to feel like we belong somewhere. We want to feel loved. And we don't know exactly how to achieve that sense of belonging and love. And so we turn to the easiest means to do so, and those means are not necessarily the right thing for us to do. So, we pick the quick and easy route and not knowing that in the long run, how detrimental it can be to our mental health, our emotional health, our future relationships, the way we see our families, the way we see our children. As teenagers, we don't think about that at all for some of us. And so we found it very necessary, especially in today's information age where so much misinformation can be shared in a few seconds. and it's so everything is at the hands of our teenagers and our children, before we can even filter anything that they see or learn. It's already in their hands and in their minds and in their sights. So that's why we really felt compelled that we need to do this.
That's awesome. I mean, I just am. My mind is turning with so many different possibilities for you guys, because I think it is so needed in our society today, what you guys are doing. And it really is beautiful and groundbreaking, and it's a great topic to talk about during Advent. It's a great topic to talk about any time of the year, but it's specifically in Advent, because we're talking about the incarnation. We're talking about God coming to earth and having and taking on our human likeness and flesh, and because of that, he makes he ratifies, right, the fact that the human body is worth something. And I remember a Marian theologian from the Seattle area, Mark Shea, one time saying to us, just kind of foreshadowing what you're talking about a little bit, or recapitulating it, just that the proclamation of the dogma of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary speaks that the human body has worth. That is actually part of the reason why we believe that our human body has a worth at all stages. And with Christ coming down during the incarnation and Mary's body assumed into heaven, here we have proof, right? We don't need any more proof from our church that the human body has dignity, and that's really what your name means, right? The human body has dignity, right? Isn't that Humana Corpus Dignitate?
Correct.
That is exactly what it was based out of.
Awesome.
So it's interesting to kind of add to what you said. When I had said earlier that my studies at the Institute were life affirming, we all have our baggage. And, one of the things I've always done when I teach is I've never been afraid to tell my students my own insecurities or fears, and because I know they're feeling it too. But there were a couple things that I'll never forget that Christopher West said to us. Was one, because, even though the church has made its proclamations against heresies even centuries ago, you'll still hear a lot of Christians, even Catholics, say this too, about how, well, when we die, we're free from this prison. And they want to see the body as a prison. And he said, no, you don't have a body, you are a body. That's part of who you are. It's part of your being. But I would say the most intriguing thing he said, because you had talked a second ago about Jesus taking on our humanity. He said, if the body is bad, then the incarnation is blasphemy.
Yeah.
So that right there, I mean, you want to talk about maybe the most, if you really understand what that means, that would be maybe the greatest cure to suicide. People who've lost hope, that think that they shouldn't be alive, if they really understood what that meant. Because I was able to really understand that, while we're obviously communal beings and we need our families and our friends and our communities and, even our parish life, our value as a person does not come from the approval of other human beings.
Amen.
It comes from the fact that God loves us for who we are and made us that way.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that. People really need to hear it, because let's face it, this past year's been hard for a lot of families, a lot of individuals. And hearing that from you, that their value does not come from other people, when people are like losing their jobs and sick and losing other things in their lives, it's just a blessing to hear that from you. It's so true. I thought I could read off some of the topics that you guys have on your website. Some of them are general faith and an intro to theology of the body, abortion, adolescent health and well-being, bullying, children's health and well-being, confirmation sacrament, family, marriage and relationships, maternal health and well-being, including postpartum depression, men's health and well-being, mental health and well-being, sexual health, and women's health and well-being. I just wanted to read those off because I think it's great for people to know and understand the services that you provide through education. Tell us more.
There's It's interesting too, because first of all, kind of going back to what you said with the pandemic, is that we have the ability to overcome. So we actually, our latest YouTube video, we were talking about overcoming adversity, and the fact that God gave us the tools to be able to survive both physically, emotionally. We have the means to do so. As far as the topics, a lot of it, I mean, if you hear as you're listing it, well-being is key in there, I think, because a lot of times, people, the World Health Organization actually revised their definition of health to not only be the physiological, but also the emotional, the spiritual, the social. Everything is interconnected. Our physical health is connected to our mental and emotional health, and vice versa. And so we feel like it is very important that we all take a look at ourselves and how we're living our lives, not just, okay, yeah, you're gonna go on a special diet and, lose the weight, but what are you putting in your body? Okay, so what are you doing to your body? Just because you're eating healthy, are you making other healthier choices? You're eating healthy during the week, but you're going to go out partying and put all this poison in your body on the weekend. So we have to live our lives, but there's different aspects, and I think there's different things that speak to other people. There are certain resources that we need, and so that's why all the health topics are very specific to gender, to maternal is a whole other body in itself, because that deals with not just what happens to us physically as women. I have 2 children. I've seen my body change, not just see it but feel it. Mentally, emotionally, it changes you as a person, it changes you as a woman. And so some people have trouble coping with that fact, or they have trouble seeing, you, especially when you start looking at your pictures from like before you had kids, and you're like, I don't look like that anymore. You see the differences. And so sometimes those differences are hard to accept. So we think it's very important to look at both the physical and the mental health, and all of that ties into the spiritual, and seeing everything through our Creator's eyes. So
thank you. You said that so well. And I just want to invite people again to go to that website. It's a really amazing website at hcdtalks.com. I see you do have a blog too. I'll just read some of the titles there. The one that you have here, Speak, Love, and Pray, The Good, the Bad, and the Valuable, Day in the Life of a Nurse, Lessons from Doubting Thomas, Reaching for Christ. I mean, I'm just listing off some of the things on your blog there, but you do have a very nice website, and it's worth it for people to check it out and learn more about what you're doing. So if somebody's listening, whether they're an individual, maybe they're a pastor, whoever it is, what can your organization, your nonprofit, for somebody who's Catholic and wants to evangelize, how would that work? So they call you or they contact you, they want you to do something for their parishioners. What would be the next steps?
Well, I have kind of a half an answer. That's actually a full answer.
Yeah.
So it's actually funny. So at the time that I would say the seed was dropped in the ground, I had been doing Theology of the Body talks at a lot of stuff here in town for a while, and just kind of sporadically. And at the time, I had applied to be on the list of the Catholic Speakers Organization, and it takes a while to get through if you're going to be picked. Well, I was finally, and this was before we started our ministry. It was probably about a year before we started it, and so last spring I was picked to do that. I was added to the roster. So it was interesting because when I was given the invitation, we had already started our ministry. We had the website. We had the nonprofit already, I think, at that point too. So I had my fingers crossed. I said, well, I don't want to stop doing this, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, they said, well, you're part of that. So, you can if we're going to bring in your ministry, along with Angelica, we'll just negotiate for that. So they can contact Catholic Speakers Organization, or if they just even contact us through email, hcdtalks@gmail.com, we'll, certainly reply, but then we'll refer them to a representative at Catholic Speakers Organization. But Angelica's actually already going through the reviewing process. So it's just, but I mean, we have experience in person. We have experience through Zoom. We've as far as the group size, I mean, we've done small groups, we've done large groups. I mean, it's we both teach. I mean, she does her college class with nurses, so we've been on the radio before, et cetera. So it's like whatever they want to do, we're ready to go.
Yeah. Just kind of piggybacking. So if you want Carlos to be part of the talk, it has to be through the Catholic Speakers Organization. Even if you contact us directly, he will be, we will have to refer you if it's both of us or just him. But if you want it specifically medical and just want me to go on at the moment, you do not have to contact Catholic Speakers. So emailing us at hcdtalks@gmail.com is the quickest way to get the conversation started. And then after that, we'll just kind of direct you to where you need to go from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. Now, you mentioned the Catholic Speakers Organization. Where is that located, and do you know their website, or do we need to know that for people listening?
I don't know, actually. I'm sorry, but I mean,
okay.
if you Google the just Catholic Speakers Organization, I mean, I don't know physically where they're located.
He doesn't know the address off the top of his head.
I don't know
address. It's okay. No worries.
I actually questioned my own address yesterday.
Okay, so it's CatholicSpeakers.com.
Okay.
And if you go on there, it actually they have like an extensive list of speakers and musicians and things like that. So if you go under the speakers, you can either do a search or you could do it by specialty. To get to Carlos, you can see him under the Theology of the Body speakers. And he's listed on there. His profile is actually linked to our website as well, so you can book him through that.
Cool.
Yeah, great to know.
Thank you.
So take us on the journey. So you started hcdtalks.com, and I'd love to know. Now, we had a pandemic year, right? So it wasn't exactly a normal year. But so what's been going on with your organization over the last year or so?
We will be honest, Anne and Bill, and we were talking to Bill about this. So literally the week that the pandemic hit and they closed California, we were slated for 3 talks. We were supposed to do a retreat. We were supposed to do we were supposed to do a puberty talk, actually, at an elementary school to the middle school students. And then we were supposed to talk to the confirmation students at my local parish. The pandemic hit that week. So we kind of went on a downward spiral for a couple of months. The pandemic, I think, hit every single one of us emotionally and spiritually, especially not being able to go into church. But we finally got back on our feet, back on the horse. And so we've been doing a lot more. Carlos is actually going to be finishing an incarnation blog in the next couple of weeks. And by January 1st, I have a blog coming out on the relationship between Mary and her son, Jesus, and kind of looking at a different view of that relationship from a maternal side, and actually seeing kind of picking from scripture and seeing Mary through Jesus's eyes as his mother. So that blog is going to come out in January. We also have a few videos out. We started our Learning the Faith series where Carlos has one about confirmation, and then the latest one was the Strength in Our Suffering video that we just did. We also have a few interviews there already, where we spoke to somebody she's not Catholic, she's a Christian, but her spiritual journey she was a military veteran, who has PTSD, and her spiritual journey in finding God, in that capacity. And then we also have a few videos. It was a long interview with this wonderful, amazing woman who, Maria Spears, she is a life coach, through the Women's Institute. And so we actually spoke to her, over like a 2.5 hour period, over being a woman and empowering yourself, spiritually in that sense. And then, because of the pandemic, I also interviewed an old coworker who is also a catechist at my church, who had COVID and his journey with that. Luckily, he was one of the milder cases, but we talked about not just his journey, but what he's seeing in the hospital as a nurse. And this is in the beginning. So, right now, I am honestly seeing so many of my old coworkers at the hospitals talk about how stressed out they are with the current situation, how there's really, the news is not lying when they say there's a lack of beds there, and how crowded the hospitals are, how crowded the ERs are. And they're all feeling the strain right now as medical providers. So, so those are on there as well. So, we tried to expand beyond just speaking in person and actually speaking one-on-one to people, writing our blogs. And we re-edited we are in the process of re-editing the third one. So Carlos actually has a book called I Am His Mother, where he takes a look at Jesus's life journey through Mary's eyes. And it's Mary, quote unquote, narrating the book. And it was very beautifully written. I've cried several times reading it, because you really get into the maternal emotions of any woman who would see their child go through what Jesus went through. And then he has what did you call it? A thriller?
Well, I want to kind of just back up a little bit, because she was asking what we've done. Because I was with a publishing company for about 10 years. It's a small company in the Midwest. And they were having some financial issues late last year, and then COVID hit, and it killed them. So they told the authors, we're not publishing any books for about 6 months, and we don't have any money to market anything. Like they were broke. So the owner, she gave us the option to walk if we wanted to. So right away I called Angelica. I'm like, well, with today's technology, Amazon, I go, do we really need a publisher? I said, why can't we just re-release the books under our ministry? Because the Mary book was the most notable book of mine, and so that was easy. But the other stories, I've written 2 of them so far. It's a trilogy. I guess someone told me they would call it a supernatural thriller series. And what it is the first one, the pitch would be, what would happen if the crucifixion never occurred? So the idea is it involves where the fallen angels devise a plan to go back in time to stop it. So God has to pick someone to stop them. But there's a faith journey in the process. So the story has a religious theme. And that's what led me to tell Angelica, why don't we just do it ourselves? Because I've written it in a way where there is a faith journey. A person goes through a struggle and they find their faith in God. And of course, I ended up writing a sequel, and that's the second book is more of, well, Lucifer's not very happy about it because, okay, if you lose to God, that makes sense. It's God. But I have a hard time admitting that my perfect plan was messed up by a person, like by a human being. I don't like them very much. So that's the second story pitch. But the third one, actually what I'm excited about is a 2-part to this is Angelica and I are very similar in a lot of ways. Like this way we see things. Like we talk to each other about our childhoods. We used to get in a lot of trouble because we always asked why, and it was like, what is the point of this? Why? I mean, I'm okay with doing this, but why? What is the truth behind this? Don't just read me the laundry list. So, when I've bounced ideas off of her, I end up getting like really excited. I get really inspired. But then lately, she'll start throwing ideas back at me. And I had a very short outline for an idea of the third story. And then one day when I was talking to her, I go, okay, you know what? Just all of a sudden, it just bursted out. And I said, you know what? You're going to help me write the third one. So that's the plan. But the other thing was, I always admired the philosophers who would write, even if their philosophy was way out there, that they would write their philosophy in a novel. Like they would, in a fictitious story, they would give you like what they believe or how they see the world or worldview, whatever. And so I had, I'm always writing fiction stuff. So I had sort of a love story. It was kind of like I wanted to challenge myself to do that. And I could never finish it. I could never, and I maybe got 60% through. And I realized because I was just writing the story to write the story, I wasn't giving it more substance. So I threw it at her and I said, well, what about if it was like a love story, but a faith love story, that involved their walk together in faith. And before I knew it, she had all these great ideas. Okay, great. You're helping me with this one too. So we kind of put together a production company. It's like the side to HCD Talks called Sun Mirror Productions. So like we've done that with these books of mine. She's also created some amazing religious items. Like her rosaries are beautiful. This was one she actually sent to me that it doesn't look very good on the screen, but it's beautiful. And then she has these First Communion ones, these Advent ones, and it's just amazing. So we've been trying to put together our gifts, if you will, and we work together to get them out. Like I'm still doing music, and I don't do it. I don't have the same goals I had when I was younger. But one of the things I did earlier this year, because we're sitting at home, was I had all these exercises that I've been going through years of practicing and playing. So I put together a drumming book. She designed the cover, and then we put it out together. So we've stayed busy. Sometimes it was just getting our stuff out there, but then, and that was kind of a way for us to get back on our feet when we were both really down and out. And then, I think sometimes we forget you have to grieve. And sometimes you have to just kind of sit there and process. And if you got to cry your eyes out, you cry your eyes out. It's part of being human. And once we both felt the itch and we started talking about it, then I remember I would just call her. We'd go over stuff. Sometimes we would just stop and pray the rosary together over the phone. And then little by little, we started to see when it was time to get going again. And then as soon as that happened, the spirit started moving. And, whether it was putting together a video, doing an interview with a podcast, or, doing some presentations via Zoom, suddenly when God wanted us to get moving again, we were moving again.
Wow. It's kind of a happy ending, I think. And that story is not over by any means. I mean, it's continuing and continuing. So I just want to congratulate you for doing truly amazing work.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great stuff, guys. And I would love to delve a little bit into especially some of the topics. I mean, you guys have amazing topics. I mean, just the topics that you guys cover. I mean, Ann went through them, and it's so cool that you are able to bring both the the medical and also the theological together, because oftentimes we don't necessarily see that. So I would love if you guys would maybe just speak to some people out there. The Holy Spirit always has a funny way of making appointments with people who are listening to this, whether they're listening live or listening later. People stumble across stuff on the internet, as you well know. I would just love it if you talk to some of the people that you're that you're serving, and maybe uplift them. I mean, we're in a time too where it's just difficult, and as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, each person has a dignity and a worth. It's built into your name. So I would just love it if maybe you talk to some of those people out there that may be struggling with body issues or the well-being. I know, Angelica, you mentioned the emotional side of things too, and I think that's that's a really big issue right now, going on in our society, right? Like that's just a huge issue, with the emotional distress and things like that. And it's okay, pop a antidepressant, and we're and move on. So maybe just talk a little bit about some of this stuff with some of the issues that we're dealing with during the pandemic with people that might be listening tonight.
Well, definitely. With the pandemic, I mean, there are things that we would normally do that we can't do, right? There are some people that, in order to kind of decompress, they go to a gym and work out for hours on end, or they would, go out with their friends, go socializing, and we can't do that. And so there are some people who are feeling cabin feverish, and they're starting to, there is a lot of increased anxiety, increased stress, with being cooped up. I know that there are people who you wouldn't normally hear complaining about losing sleep, literally saying they are now on sleeping pills because they cannot sleep. One, because they don't have good coping mechanisms, and two, because they're hearing all this news, and it's so distressing for them that it causes even greater anxiety, especially those, I think, who have loved ones or friends who are close to the situation. It's even if you have a little scare, it'll, I'm in the medical field. I had a few times where I was near somebody who had tested positive. And I was with them for a while. I mean, I'm teaching nursing students in a hospital. I'm working in a clinic. It's, it's there. It's around me. So, I think one of the biggest things is, first of all, I mean, it seems like such an obvious answer, but to be honest, we all need to, especially now we have more time. Definitely one of the biggest things is to sit down and pray and find your spirituality again. One of the things that I just kind of started doing out of random was, instead of, just reading the gospel of the day or something, I literally would grab my Bible and just open it to a random page. And somehow every single time I did that, whatever I needed to hear in that moment was written on the page. And sitting there, and they say that meditation and prayer actually stimulates not just the feel-good portions of our brain and the pleasure portion, but it actually calms us down and relaxes us and centers us again, and decreases our stress response in our bodies. So I really think that definitely taking time to go back to prayer and meditation, and it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel frustrated, especially those of us who are going through hard times with this. Some people are losing their jobs, or they're getting furloughed. It's a very, you don't know where your next meal is coming from. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Some of us did go back to work when they started opening things up again. And then the next day, here we go. They're closing things down. So we're all in a time of uncertainty. But trying to find some ways to keep your faith, I think, is definitely key at this moment. If you're angry, you're angry. God knows why you're angry. He knows what's in our hearts, right? And he knows every single one of us. He knows why you're angry. He knows why you're lashing out. But we still need to make the effort to try to find healthy coping mechanisms in order to get through this. He gave us the tools to be able to get through this and to push through this. And so, he gave us the technology to be able to interact. Look at the four of us right now, all different states, all across the country, all in different time zones, and able to communicate, and to be honest, I mean, even Carlos and I both taught this semester via Zoom. It was not an easy thing because you could not tell. I taught both nursing students and catechism students via Zoom. It was not easy to know if you were connecting with people, but then you hear later on how much you did affect their lives. So we still have the means to do so, just not maybe in the capacity we would like.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much. You just packed in so much for people. So thank you so much for just speaking to the heart too. I mean, we have to as Catholics, our ministry here, Patchwork Heart Ministry, is all about the heart. So I always say, God uses the word heart over 600 times in the Bible. So therefore, it's got to be an integral part of the body and an integral part of our spirituality. And with that being said, I think, when you speak like you just did to the heart to help people understand, just the core of how important that they are, but also how important some of the actions that they need to take in their lives to develop the prayer, to develop the, those actions so that they can take on the difficulties with a spirituality and also with some practicality going through the days. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I agree. And also what comes to mind as we're headed a little bit toward the end of the podcast, I know that there's some people who are listening that are fascinated by the theology of the body. It is a very big topic. And many pastors and people within church leaders know that for young people, especially, to be educated on what it means, there's still a lot of people who don't really know what it is. So I would love it if you could talk a little bit about that. And for those people who are listening that are maybe thinking, I'd love them to talk to our young people at our parish. So tell us, with the theology of the body, how would that go? You're talking to a group of high school kids or young people. What will your talk start with? What will they focus on as you're communicating with youth and young adults?
It really comes down to introducing people to God's vision of humanity. And what's actually amazing is a lot of people, I've talked to people in my own diocese who are in religious education, and they'll look at me and say, is that the sex ed piece? I'm like, well, that's part of it. I'm like, it's about being human. It's about looking at who you are, how God intended for you to be seen. And while it's nice to talk and target young people, there's a lot that all of us as adults have not been taught. And a lot of it was just simply a matter of it just wasn't taught in school. It wasn't necessarily taught in our parishes. And I think a lot of it was just culturally speaking, people were afraid of it. I had said earlier, my intention was never to teach morality. And, I would be lying if I didn't say that there are certainly topics that I have to cover that I don't necessarily look forward to going to work that day. But the one thing that I've learned is that all of the disciplines go together. And John Paul II's reflections on the human person, it draws from all those disciplines. So like, for example, I can have this really politically conscious student. And this is where me bringing in the medical and the science comes in handy, is they, because they want things to be defined as the culture says, I'm like, that's fine. I know where you're coming from, but this is how the human body works. And whether we like it or not, this is how the human body works. It's almost like at one point when Christopher West said, why is it that when a woman's pregnant, right away everyone's freaking out? He's like, wait, your body did something right. See, the problem is our thinking is off. Like, I'll never forget years ago, I think it was Hallmark. They did a Father's Day commercial. And what they did was a bunch of women, I guess, that either had just gotten pregnant or were planning to get pregnant. They were part of this quote unquote conspiracy. And I say that, with a smile on my face, where they were going to record telling their husbands they were pregnant. Now, let's think real quick. Wives, husbands, they got married. They want to have a family. She's going to tell him she's pregnant. He's going to be very happy about it. So you see these guys, like they would give him a little gift and a little note in there. And the guys they're smiling. They're jumping up and down. They're jumping for joy. 3 or 4 of the fathers started crying, tears of joy. And I'm thinking, that's what a woman dreams of. That's what she wants to experience when she tells her husband, I'm pregnant, not, is it mine? That's completely, that would be crushing. But for them to see, how did God intend for you to live, and how will your life be if you follow that? And sometimes it's interesting because I always tell my students, I'm just sharing with you what I was taught. This was life affirming for me. And what I would rather share with your listeners is really feedback I've received. And again, I want to make it very clear. I'm only sharing what I've been taught. I didn't develop this theology. I mean, I'm no genius here. I've had, of course, young boys won't do this in front of their friends, but I've had young boys say, this was very affirming to me because I've always felt I was not what I'm expected to be, especially when it came to how they're expected to treat women. And on top of that, to be honest, one of the reasons why my former colleague wanted me to get into the theology of the body was my school at the time already had 2 teachers who were teaching it, but they were women. And she said, I really think there are some things that the girls need to hear from a man. So when I teach on Ephesians 5:25 about a husband should be willing to lay his life down for his wife. And when I tell the girls, this is because you're a woman, not because of anything you would do for him. The moment your gender was determined in the womb, you were worth this. You have no reason to expect less from that. Literally having girls cry, and many of them saying, deep down, I always knew that, but all the stuff I hear around me leads me to think otherwise. And this is the same for adult women too, because they've also been bombarded with this culture. Like there is nothing you have to do to earn that kind of love from a man. And to be honest, the best compliment I recall receiving was from a girl who told me one day at school, a lot of the boys are mad at you right now. I go, what did I do? She goes, no, they're mad at you because of what the girls are learning in class. Now they won't settle. They want a boyfriend who's going to treat them like a queen. And I say, well, you need to thank the Holy Father for that because he's the one that brought this teaching to light.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that. And that's good news for people who are listening to hear. I want to encourage them to reach out to you at hcdtalks.com and connect. And for whatever capacity you can help them, whether it's at their church, their school, their organization, or even just personally, right? I mean, there might
Absolutely.
be someone who just personally has some questions or whatever. So would you have anything that you'd like to say to married couples about the theology of the body? Because that's also an area that people need to be educated. People who didn't learn it when they were younger. So what can they learn about it now? They're married, maybe they have some kids. What can they learn about it?
Something that was really interesting was I actually had to do the theology of the body intro to the middle school parents at my son's school. That was a bit nerve-wracking because I didn't have Carlos with his extensive certification knowledge with me. But I've studied what I've done too, and it was really interesting because when you talk to them about the relationship that should be, and not the relationship we currently have, quite a few of them were shaking I saw wives shaking their heads, agreeing. And the men just actually really staring at me because and really intent on what I was saying, because a lot of it is really about how we treat one another and how we should be treating one another. And one thing that I emphasized with them is, how are we going to teach this to your kids and you're modeling something else at home? So it was, that was one of married couples actually, I mean, even if you get just the basic theology of the body book that Carlos had, and I actually got one too, it shows you where we are lacking based on our own life experiences, what we've seen, what we've been inundated with, just in society, versus how we really should be thinking and feeling about one another and treating one another.
When my first course, I was, the first time I went was in March of 2010. And Philadelphia, when it's snowing, when you're from Arizona.
I hear you, definitely, even on
Oh,
this
man. Now, that was actually the first time I saw real snow, not like a little patch of ice on the ground. my roommate was laughing at me because he was from Toronto, and I'm like, so my foot went in the ground. Is my sock supposed to be wet? It was really funny. But I was married at the time for 12 and a half years. And I remember the first full day, because we were there for a week, and we were up in the mountains, so I'm not going anywhere. So even when you're not in class, you're walking around and you're just decompressing. And I would go on these big highs, and I'd go to these lows. And I remember calling home the first night, and I was just like, man, I'm an absolute horrible person. I'm a horrible husband. I'm a horrible father. And my wife's like, to my surprise, didn't say to me, well, you didn't have to go 3,000 miles. I could have told you that here, but she heard something in my voice, and we just talked a little bit. And she's like, are you okay? I mean, should you have gone? I said, no, I'm good. I said, retreats, there's that dark day. There's, it's a roller coaster. And the next day I was fine. It was, because it was more of me having to confront my trash, my own, baggage, if you will. And, dealing with it, processing with it, but then really understanding what it meant to say, Jesus sees you for who you really are. Like, we look at sin and we don't realize in most cases people sin to medicate pain. We don't ask why they did it. Like, one of the things, because I've worked with high school kids for so many years, I've been on discipline boards, and which is not the most fun experience in the world. But you're sitting there, and sometimes before a kid is asked to withdraw from the school, you have to have a hearing with their parents, and there you have the deans reading what the kid did in front of the parents, so it's really awkward. And so we asked, you talk to the kid, why did you do this? And I tell you, I have no idea how many of those boards I've been on. I only had one time where the kid had a different problem. Every single time it's because they were trying to fit in. And they all said, I knew it was wrong. And it just breaks my heart because I have a friend I've known since I was in second grade. We've known each other forever. We could not be more different than two people can be. I mean, my mother's asked me more than once, how are you guys friends? When we get together, because he's from California, so when I see him, and maybe if I'm lucky, it's twice a year, we argue. We just have different opinions and different worldviews, but we respect each other. Like we've always, even when we were 9 years old, we respected each other. Like, hey, that's your thing, that's cool. But we, I guess, saw the value of the person. And it's interesting because a lot of times Christians will also want to ostracize certain people or avoid people. Well, that's not what Christ did. Christ went to the sick. And a lot of times by just sitting and listening to them, that right there shows them that somebody cares. Like, I think of homeless people, like, sometimes, if you see someone walk by one and maybe they're that person that says, why don't you just get a job? Even though they're being cruel, which they shouldn't do, they're at least acknowledging their existence, where some people just walk by like they're not even there. Yeah. I've never been homeless, but I can't imagine which one feels worse.
No, you said that so well. In fact, I think we have so much more to talk about because you guys have an amazing story, not only with the nonprofit, but just personally. So please do come back again. I'm sorry to say that I think we're out of time almost on Sowing Hope because it's 7 Eastern. But thank you so much, both of you. Would you have any final words before we end?
She's muted.
Oh, y'all mute yourself there, Angelica.
Sorry.
No problem.
Just one final word from me, and I did share this Bible quote with you, but it's one of my favorites to share, and it kind of shows you how the Bible actually understands the human body more than we know. And, this is scripture that's written thousands of years. A joyful heart is the health of the body, but a depressed spirit dries up the bones. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22. It is so true. And so it really goes to show how much of our spirituality and our emotionality is connected to our physicality. And this is knowledge that's been known for a very, very long time. It's not brand new science. There's so much in the Bible that I'm reading it now and I'm like, wow, this is really foreshadowing what is going on today. And really relevant to what is today. So definitely, but I want to leave you with that.
Beautiful.
That's amazing. Thank you. Would you both come back again?
We'd love to. Thank you.
Yeah,
Very, very
absolutely.
good. Very good. So, again, I ask everyone to go to hcdtalks.com and learn about Carlos Solorzano and Angelica DellaLlana. Thank you again for being a guest on Sowing Hope. And
Thank you
also,
for having us.
have a Merry Christmas.
You
You
too.
too. Thank you.
Well, folks, thank you so much for being part of our podcast. As always, head over to our websites, patchworkheart.org and desantis.com to check out more information about us. And until next time, keep beating to your Catholic hearts and sowing hope into broken hearts. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and andesantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Andy Santis 2.
Are you looking for a way to deepen your prayer life and faith this Advent season? A Contemplative Las Posadas by Bill Snyder is a novena that offers reflections based on the traditional Mexican devotion that reenacts the journey of Saint Joseph and the Blessed Virgin Mary from Nazareth to Bethlehem. The ecclesiastically approved devotional is available for purchase for only $4.99 on our website, patchworkheart.org, or emailing info@patchworkheart.org.